So here is that weird noise I was hearing every morning. This is what it should sound like. Nothing. This is something that puts tension on the serpentine belt. You can hear the bearings inside are bad. That's why it sounds like a supercharger. I included a list of tools you will need for this job and a list of suggested tools that may help make this job easier. The parts that I use will be linked in the description. Just please note, I am not a trained mechanic. I am self-taught and I learned this as I went. So I am not responsible for the work that you do. If this was helpful though, please consider making a video of something you know how to do. I learned how to do repairs from watching videos, and the world only benefits from us helping each other. At the end of the day, I'm not worried about any subscribers. Please comment if you did do this job. I'd love to see how many people end up using this tutorial, and maybe I can get a running total of how much money we've all saved and have that updated in the description. All right, so before this starts, I just want to say the first couple of clips are being filmed after the fact, because when I went back through the editing process, it didn't quite make sense. Also, when I started this, I didn't think I'd be making a video, but because there wasn't a video on how to do this, I figured out halfway through I probably should make a video. So, as a heads up to begin with, you're going to remove your terminal leads for your battery. Negative first, then positive. That's a 10 mil. That's a 10 mil. Once those are disconnected, you're then going to take a 10 mil to remove this nut here. From there, you will remove your battery. All right, so the next thing you're gonna do is remove the engine cover. This is a 10 mil nut, that's a 10 mil. When you remove this cover, there's a little rod here in the back that there's 2 clips on, and just kind of lift it up and pull straight out. I would recommend putting the nuts back on the thread that's below the cover once you get this off. Next thing you'll do is take some of the plastic clips out of this cover here, put it off to the side. You may break a couple because of the heat. They might be fragile and they may snap, so just be aware of that. All right, next thing you're going to want to do is take a pair of radiator hose clamps and clamp off this overfill tube right here, and then remove this tubing from this overfill reservoir. So the next thing we're going to do is remove the fan clutch from the water pump. So in a perfect world, you'll be able to get these 4 12mm bolts off. Now, I was not able to the first time, so I'll show a video here in a bit on how to do that if yours are seized on pretty well. In a perfect world, if you can get these off okay, what you'll need are 2 12mm wrenches. So what you'll do is ideally take a bad wrench, or maybe your not favorite one, and put it on one of the 12mm bolts. So we're going to leave that there for demonstration. Again, there's 4 bolts. Then directly across from that bolt, take your other 12mm wrench, and while you're holding this wrench, you're going to loosen the bolts here. All right, so you're going to loosen that up, and then from there, switch sides and just keep going crisscross until you've got them all loose. Once they're loose, you can take like a ratcheting wrench to loosen up those 4 bolts, because otherwise you're going to have a hard time getting this thing to release because it's going to keep spinning. I could not get this clutch off of this water pump pulley, and it was starting to get to the point where I was rounding off one of them, and I figured, you know what, I'm gonna try another way. So what I did was I just took a breaker bar with just a tiny extension and then a 12-point socket, stuck it on that, and then spun the fan to actually loosen all of the nuts. This is kind of an inside view of what essentially you'll be doing. So I've got a breaker bar on a little extension and then a 10 mil. So what I did was, if this is the top where my hand is up here, this is the top of the radiator. As you turn the fan, it's actually going to loosen these bolts. Now you'll kind of have to follow the fan in this kind of motion as you loosen up the bolts. But one of the good things going for you is that this is magnetic, so they will kind of stick closer to the end here, or you can see what I did. And I had a little magnet thing just down here just to kind of keep some magnetism in the area in case one didn't go where I thought it would. Then once you've loosened up those fan bolts there, you'll take a 10 mil socket and remove that bolt, and another 10 mil to remove this bolt here. And then from there, you'll be able to remove the fan shroud, the fan itself, and everything all in one piece. Again, this plastic piece won't be there. Again, I'm filming this after the fact, but this fan shroud and then the fan itself down there will come off as one piece, and it'll go back as one piece. Okay, so first you'll need to, once you get all this stuff out of the way, take a 14 mil to the belt tensioner, and then as you're turning it, this is the power steering pump pulley, kind of slowly work the serpentine belt off that way. That'll kind of help release the tension, so that way we can get to this guy here in a bit. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this frame holding in this wiring harness here. This just takes a 10 mil and it'll pop right out. All right, sorry I can't get my camera to focus real well, but this thing right here is going to be the wiring harness for the alternator. You're going to take that out. There's a little tab right here on the right side that you push in, and it should just pop out. Just be careful with it. Again, it's plastic in a high heat area. The next thing you're going to do is remove the little plastic cover around just right above that green thing there. Do you see where I disconnected that wiring harness? It's gonna focus off again, but right there. Be careful. Mine just, when I tried to take it off, launched into next Tuesday, so I gotta find that, but just be careful with it. Okay, so the best way I found to get that bolt was to take this little bracket and tuck it underneath where the battery was, and then come in from behind this little plate here and loosen up this 10 mil bolt right there. And then once I got it free, I kind of just freeing it with my hands because it's such a tight area. Okay, so the next part is we gotta remove this 14 mil bolt, and then there's another tucked back here. I'll get a better shot of it, hopefully. There we go. I'm gonna spray it with some PB Blaster because God knows how long this has been in here. Okay, so there's two 10 mil bolts on this wiring harness, one right there, and another back behind the wiring harness. It's right there. So again, 10 mil right there, another right here. What I'm gonna do is get those 14 mil bolts out. Okay, so what I ended up doing was I just used a lot of PB Blaster, smacked it with a wrench a couple times, then used this breaker bar to kind of help loosen it up. This thing seems kind of seized, so I might kind of deal with that later, but if that happens to you, this gave me just enough clearance, and I'm using a 6-point wrench here, just because, again, this thing seems seized, and yeah, a couple times for good measure. Okay, so this is the next bolt we're gonna get, another 14 mil, so you can kind of understand where I'm talking about with this. And fan shroud removed, underneath the oil filter, right there. Okay, there it is right there. Got it loosened. And take a little extender and get the last of this alternator out. All right, now with both bolts disconnected, I'm gonna try to wiggle this guy out. So I'm gonna pull that up, put it where the battery would be. All right, next thing we're gonna do is take the skid plate off so we can get to the AC compressor. I put different bolts in because mine were all rusted. So double check to see what bolts these are. There's 4 of them, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. Okay, so I'm underneath the Tacoma right now, and I'm gonna zoom in so you can see where the AC compressor bolts are for underneath. Again, remove the skid plate. I'm gonna zoom in here. Okay. Sorry, bear with me, guys. Okay. There's one bottom bolt. There's the other. There's a wiring harness you're gonna have to disconnect. In fact, you can actually see one of the bolts up there. And there's another one right up there. I'll show you from the top side. Just be careful because we're not removing this AC compressor. So keep these lines sealed. Otherwise, you're gonna have some refrigerant on your hands, and that's no fun. So keep those connected. We're just gonna scoot this little guy to the side. That way we can get to the belt tensioner. So I need this AC compressor line to kind of scoot around for me a little bit. So I'm gonna remove that little bracket bolt right there. So that way it can kind of scoot around a little bit more easily. And here it is from the top side. You saw that one, and then there's the other one that I couldn't show you. There's the second wiring harness. You're gonna disconnect there from the top. And again, we're trying to scoot this aside so we can get to this guy here. Okay, before I disconnect the AC compressor, I've got kind of like a little zip tie contraption going on where it's hooked up to my hood, so that way when I move it, it doesn't fall. It's just kind of suspended. So I'd recommend you do the same. Okay, so for this first bolt on the bottom left, I had to use a ratcheting wrench because I couldn't fit anything else through to unbolt that. Then do the same for the back bottom bolt. Again, 12mm ratcheting wrench is kind of what's my friend here. Alright, apologize, can't get my camera to focus real well. Ah, there we go. So there's the top bolt right there and there. Again, 12mm. Gonna hit it with a breaker bar, loosen it up. Then I've got this suspended so that way I can then get to the tensioner pulley. Hooray, did it. Okay, so that AC compressor is suspended by the zip ties here. And so right there, finally, that's the tensioner pulley. Okay, so now there's 4 bolts that we gotta take out. There's 1, 2, there's 3, and 4. All right, so I'll let you take a gander at that. All right, so I've been sitting here wondering why I can't get this tensioner off because I was watching another video that showed there was only 4 bolts. I was incorrect, and there's a 5th bolt right here. So I'm gonna correct that in editing, but it's tucked. Let's see if I can, right there. So that's the last bolt. So there's actually 5 bolts. That's the last one, right above that harness there. Okay, the other thing I'll mention is these take 14mm, get off. And just so you know, you're not crazy if you have to do all of these bolts by hand. Just so you know, what I showed you is bolt number 1 is going to be a lot longer than bolts 2, 3, and 4. But I had to loosen these up with a breaker bar. Just be careful about your radiator. I accidentally gave it a love tap, so I'll have to deal with that later. But bolt 3 here, I think is going to be the end of me. But the others you can reasonably do with a socket set. Again, 14mm. This one's going to take some convincing. Okay. Normally I wouldn't do this kind of stuff for a video because I don't want to mess it up in real life here. But if you hold the AC compressor with one hand and you stick a 14mm in on bolt number 3, you can fit it in there. But just be really careful. All right, just for consistency, we're going to call this bolt number 5 here. You're going to need an extended reach socket, or just a long depth one, so you can get this one out, because an extender is too big, shallow is too small, a bigger one or kind of a deep well socket is just right. Okay, so finally got this tensioner out. Normally I throw away or recycle my parts, but this one I'm going to keep as a trophy. So let's reverse the process, and then I'm also going to add a few idler pulleys and a new serpentine belt on this, because I've already got the whole thing apart. Why not? Okay, for now the idler pulleys, this is technically idler pulley number 2. This one behind your radiator hose is idler pulley number 2. And that shiny one down there is idler pulley number 1. Per Tacoma World Forms, the torque pound that you need for this is 29 foot-pounds. This one's 29 foot-pounds. That one's 40. So we're gonna swap those real quick. Small extension gets the top number 2 pulley. Then these other 2 you can get just fine, but without an extension. All right, so again, once you get all those loosened, 14 mil, 14 mil, and then 14 mil. This one's gonna give you a little bit more pushback width. So again, I had to use a breaker bar and then this deep well socket to get this guy out. Okay, so now we're gonna take idler pulley number 1, put it right there. Again, 40 foot-pounds right there, 14 mil. All right, we got idler pulley number 2, ready to go back on. So let's get it done. So again, torque it down, 29 foot-pounds, 14 mil. Okay, all the pulleys are on now. So now we're gonna do what we came here for and put the tensioner pulley on. All right, honestly, if you made it this far, getting this pulley back in there is not too hard. I just pulled the upper radiator hose in, or pulled it, excuse me, that way, then just worked it back down in there. Again, it probably will make more sense if you do it in person. You just line up the bolts. Okay, so getting the bolts back in, you kind of have to just kind of feel your way around there. I've just been hand tightening everything until I can get a wrench on there. Be careful, because it'll seem like you've got it in, and then when you go to remove your hand, the bolt comes out with you. So going off the old made up numbering system, I did bolt 4, now I'm doing bolt 2, kind of like a crisscross pattern, like you were doing like taking a rim off your car, trying to get that so it's kind of stabilized, and then I'm going to put the rest on, because I started with 1 and it just wasn't working. So for bolt number 3, I had to tape my ratchet so that way it wouldn't keep kicking to the off position, because I've been sitting here trying to tighten this thing only to find out it keeps alternating when it hits that AC compressor. So tape yours down and you'll have better luck. Okay, now we're going to get this compressor back on now that that belt tensioner is where it needs to be. Okay, so reminder, we put the black 12mm bolts back in. One goes right there, one right there, and then 2 below. Again, 12mm, and we're going to just get it as good as we can and then clip this wiring harness back on. Okay, so as a reminder, that's one of the bolts for the compressor, and then the other one is tucked back behind these lines here. So that's the fun one. Okay, so for this last bolt here, on the compressor, so this is the bottom left, it's really hard to get around this line right here. So what you can do, I know it's kind of cramped and really crappy, I'm sorry guys, but if you take the washer, push it down a little bit, feed the bolt in, and then push the head past the line, as long as it's smooth, or you take a smooth side to the line, it'll push right on through. So rather than taking it at a point and having it scrape the line, if you have where it's smooth and have that washer down a little bit, that'll go in a little bit easier actually. All right, so while I'm underneath here too, I'm gonna go ahead and cut my little zip tie holder system. Served us well, but it's time for, like all good things, to end. So now that the AC compressor is back on, and take this wiring harness and make sure that tab is up like that. And snap that in. Okay, so we're also gonna put this bracket back on for the AC line now that everything's good with the compressor. Just kind of align it like that. Again, it's this 10 mil. Okay, so we're gonna put the alternator back in. These two prongs here are gonna go around that little thing right there. Part of that belt tensioner that we put on. And then this single little ear, whatever you want to call it, is gonna go right there. So just slide it in. Be careful about those two little wiring harnesses. All right, so remember those long silver bolts, 14 mil. Again, one goes there, then one fits in between those two little ears or prongs down there. Now we're gonna connect this generator plug to this spot here. Again, we used this little 10 mil bolt, or nut, excuse me, right there. And then you've got the two 10 mil bolts right there. We got one nut on. Excuse me, bolt. It's getting late. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. All right, one bolt there. Then we'll put this guy right there. All right, so now we're gonna put the serpentine belt on. As a reminder, here's your tensioner. I'm gonna put a picture of the diagram in the description so you can take a look at that. Turn this counterclockwise, so it'll go this way, in order to release the tension on this new pulley. Okay, so I had it routed, except it wasn't on the power steering pump, which is that guy right there. I've got a breaker bar, an extension, and then this is a Gates pulley here. So it's a 13 mil, and when I pull on it counterclockwise, I had plenty of clearance to be able to get that belt on the power steering pump just fine. So hopefully that works out just for you. Again, just take a look at the belt diagrams and just make sure you've got it routed fine. Of course, always take a picture beforehand. All right, so now we're gonna put the fan, or the radiator fan, and the fan shroud back inside. Okay, sorry I couldn't get a video of this guy here, but basically you put the shroud in and the fan at the same time. And you kind of have to, if this is the shroud, you kind of have to go at it from a diagonal angle, because there's a couple of these hoses and a few of these little clamps that it gets kind of stuck on. So once you get that, you'll take those 4 bolts, put it back on that fan assembly there, and you're almost done. All right, so you're gonna take these bolts, put them right there. And again, they're 12 mil. Use a ratcheting 12 mil. Makes this a lot easier on you. Okay, now that we've got these all screwed on there, we're gonna put the bolt back here and back there. And again, that's where that bolt is on this side. And you'll tighten both down with a 10 mil socket. Put your overflow hose back in. All right, and then we're gonna take this wiring harness here, put it back up against its spot, and tighten it down with this 10 mil bolt. All right, last thing we got to do here is put the battery back in, then put the engine cover back on. Again, these are 10 mil as well. 10 mil, 10 mil. And when you're all done, put all the plastic clips back in this cover here and place it back in. Okay, and then if you took your skid plate off, you'll want to put that back on. Again, I removed the original bolts that it came with, so your sizes will be different, but you'll hook those spots of the skid plate back on the front.